Hello, welcome to this week's Staff of Room Short. This week we're going to have 5 minutes and 2 questions all about the idea of holiness. Okay, so holiness sounds quite holy, because it is. And holiness might seem like something that is for other people. You know, when we look at certain people and think, wow, they're super holy, they go to church all the time and they say prayers and stuff. Yeah, we can kind of have an idea of holiness, which I think maybe makes us sometimes think that holiness isn't for us. We think that holiness has to look a particular way or kind of involve a set of actions or a set of practices. And very interestingly, when we look at what real holiness is, we understand a couple of things really. First thing, we understand that everybody is called to holiness. And that holiness is simply understanding what God's will for us is in our lives and then putting it into practice. It's not about who can spend the most time saying the rosary or who goes to church the most often. It's actually about living a life in a way that Christ is calling us to live it. And the best example, the best way of understanding holiness is to look at the example of the saints. We celebrate saints, particularly around the Feast of All Saints Day in November. And you know, when you start to read their stories, they are not all people we would think necessarily on the surface are holy. They are not people who all just spend all their time in prayer. I mean, there are lots of them that do. But these are diverse and interesting and fascinating and confusing and spectacular people. But the one thing they've got in common is they found a way to live their life for others, and in doing so, of course, live their life in a way that God has called them to do. Whether that's to use their intellect to be great theologians, whether that's to use their love to be great compassionate carers for people, whether that's simply using their opportunity or their situation to make great sacrifices for people. Saints come in all different shapes and sizes, as does holiness. And so I suppose the first thing I want us to think about is, what does it look like for you to be holy? Not what holiness looks like, but what does it look like for you to be holy? So what does it look like in your life when you are doing the right thing, the good thing, the loving thing? Because that is true holiness. There's an amazing series, which I'm going to point a link to somewhere on the screen, by a friend of ours called David Wells. He's a brilliant speaker. He did a video series for us called Bad Ideas About Holiness, which kind of dispels some of those myths. I would absolutely encourage you to go and listen and watch them. There's 5 videos. They're amazing, and they maybe help us understand more about that practical holiness. But that is what it's called. That is kind of, I suppose, the best definition. It's those real life doing things that make a difference to others, that make love real, that actually make us holy. Not how many times we can say the Hail Mary or the Our Father. So the first question is then today, I want you to think about, what is it that you do out of love for those around you? Because that's holiness. Second of all, what is it you recognise in others that maybe we need to celebrate as holiness? And I think that's going to be super important. When people recognise and look at people and go, wow, I want to be more like that, are we actually seeing an example of holiness that we could replicate, that we could be inspired by? Maybe you might want to find or think about someone who you think is holy in the kind of truest sense of the word and tell them just what's so inspirational about them. It's quite nice to do that. As a bit of homework, I would definitely suggest having a look at some of the lives of the saints, particularly if there's things you're interested in. There's some amazing websites with all the patron saints of various things and why they became patron saints of various things. And their stories are fascinating. These are not all the traditional stereotypical people you would imagine are super holy. They are people who had real lives, real messy lives, who often made mistakes and messed up and got angry and got sad and did bad things, and then at some point in their life realised what God was calling them to do and what their life would look like when they lived it for others and lived it in the way that God had called them to live it. And that's how they became holy. And that's how we become holy, by living our lives in the way that God calls us to do so and in the way that we were made to do so. So think about those 2 things. What does holiness look like for you? What's kind of your version of it? How do you act out of love for others? And who is it in your community who you see holiness in? And how can that inspire you to be more holy yourselves? Have a very holy week. And have a look at that video series with David Wells, because it's amazing. And we look forward to seeing you very soon.